A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, at magandang gabi. Welcome to your hour, and this is Rita Gadi. The title of our program this afternoon, Truth Speaks. But before I go into the subjects that we are going to discuss this afternoon, I'd like to read a quote which was sent to me by the daughter of a good friend of mine from Katipunan. She was formerly a counselor. I don't exactly know what she is doing right now, but she is the daughter of a very good friend of mine, one of the leading lawyers that we had then in Katipunan. And this is how she expressed herself, especially with the passage of time and the many things that have happened in our lives. And I quote this: "History will judge us for the good things that we failed to do, the chances of rightful living that we failed to choose, for the concern we denied our country, and for the lessons we never learned." Ulitin ko po kasi, it refers to many of the things that we do in our lives, also the things that we do not do. So I'd like to repeat this because that introduces our program this afternoon. History will judge us for the good things we failed to do, the chances of rightful living we failed to choose, for the concern we denied our country, and for the lessons we never learned. So that is what happens if we do not speak the truth, if we do not reveal the truth. So this afternoon, we will let truth speak for itself. And what is the meaning of truth? Well, there are so many words that we can say as far as the truth is concerned. And I would just like to summarize some of those that I have gathered from ancient times to the present. And that is how it goes. It has to be valid. The truth is valid. It is certain. It is just. It is honest. It is exact. It is rightful. It is correct. It is accurate. It is consistent. It is factual. It is precise. It is verified. It is genuine. It is authentic. And it is infallible. So all of those words express, define, and give us the meaning of what is the truth. Over the past so many weeks, from the time that the fever of the elections for May has caused another pandemic as far as our perceptions are concerned, so many things have come up as far as the qualifications of candidates are concerned. But there is one particular aspect that bothers us, that bothers me, for instance, because being a witness to what has happened in the past 21 years of President Ferdinand E. Marcos and Mrs. Imelda Romualdez Marcos, and the 35 years after 1986, where briefly we were able to interview President Marcos in Honolulu during his period of exile, and Mrs. Marcos all the way up to this day. So all of these experiences and episodes in the lives of these two individuals, these two personalities that actually are indelibly marked in our contemporary history, is something that I would have to express, or something that we have to bring out as far as the truth is concerned. And that is precisely why, as I said, we had to go over many of the things that have been brought out insofar as this election is concerned. They do not directly affect the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., but what is happening is, it is always being raised as though It is something that would destroy his reputation or his chances of winning the elections for the presidency. But this is not a campaign strategy that I'm after. Neither is it an apology for anything. It is simply, as I said, the title of our program, Let the Truth Speak. So let us begin with the many things that are being said. And it will be the truth that will speak for this. Some people say that there is a certain degree of malice or there is an intent to rewrite history when we talk about Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Romualdez Marcos. Why is this so? So let us have the truth speak for itself. First, there is this issue of unexplained wealth, which has been branded as stolen wealth or money stolen from the Filipino people. Sometimes they just use the word plunder. As a matter of fact, this is repeatedly said that, hindi lang ibalik ang ninakaw na yaman, wag na rin ibalik yung anak ng nagnakaw. Something to that effect. So this all zeroes in with that particular issue of the wealth of Ferdinand Marcos. And this is being dragged insofar as his son is concerned, who is a candidate for the presidency. Now here we come to what exactly is this wealth that was stolen from the Filipino people? In so many episodes in the past, I must have talked about this endlessly. The money of the Filipino people, our money, is in the national budget. That is where our taxes go. It goes to that budget which manages our government. So it does not involve your money in your private bank. It does not involve your savings in your home if you're keeping money in your homes. It only involves the money that is in the national budget, in the taxes that we pay. That is the money of the Filipino people. Now, when there is the accusation that the money of the Filipino people was stolen, that there was plunder. So, what is the truth? Let the truth speak. Well, the truth spoke in New York City, for instance. But why there? Because it was in the trial in New York City when the Marcoses were accused of the violation of an American law, which we know as the RICO law. This is the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. That means that Marcos, during his regime, run the government as a criminal syndicate. What an insult to our government, and also what an insult to President Marcos. But that's exactly the law that they cited. And what does this law entail? It means that there were 4 real estates in New York City that were bought. And they alleged that this was bought by the money that Marcos stole from the Filipino people. Okay, so we had 4 months of the trial in New York City in the Southern Federal Court of Judge John F. Keenan. In that particular courtroom, the Philippine government, together with the Swiss government and together with the American government, gathered all the documents that they can find so that they can come to the accusations, proof that Marcos stole the money of the Filipino people. So what kind of documents were presented there? Bank documents from the government bank documents from the Swiss banks, bank documents from American banks. They did not present the Philippine budget where the money of the Filipino people is located, where it is deposited. Instead, they had a paper trail of the movement of the money from the Swiss banks to the American banks and to the purchase of those 4 real estate buildings in New York City. So what happened during the trial? 4 months and a half. They had 350,000 pages of documents regarding this money trail that has moved from New York, from Switzerland to the United States of America, and then all the way to New York City. How much was the money involved? Well, insofar as the buildings were concerned, these are 40 prime real estate buildings in New York City. You had a building in 40 Wall Street, where it was claimed the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America was read. That's at Wall Street, which is the finance district of New York, of America for that matter. And 40 Wall Street, that building cost something like $70 million, $70 million. Then there was the Crown Building. The Crown Building was one of those that won an award because when it was purchased, Mrs. Marcos had the top of the building painted gold, which really looked like a crown, and that was why they named it as the Crown Building. And that cost $51 million, 5-1. And then there was the other building at 200 Madison Avenue. This was also used every once in a while as some kind of a consulate. 200 Madison Avenue, that's the address of the other building, and that cost $50 million, $50 million. And then you have the Herald Center, which is really one of the biggest shopping areas now. You had Macy's, etc., and all of that. And that's the Herald Center at the time. And that cost $17.5 million, $17.5 million. So total, the buildings, the 4 real estate buildings cost something like $188 million. Now, it was alleged in the trial that Marcos stole the money of the Filipino people and bought these 4 real estate properties. But there is not one single document that would show that there was money taken from the Philippine treasury, where the money of the Filipino people is, and that money from the Philippine treasury landed in either Switzerland or in California or in New York City, and that money originated from the treasury of the Republic of the Philippines. There was none. There was no document that showed that any, even 1 centavo, was taken from the Philippine treasury and used for the purchase of these buildings amounting to $188 million. What we saw is what they presented in the New York courthouse. I was describing what it looked like, something like 6 feet by 12 feet folding, where they had the squares showing that from Switzerland and several foundations, it went to some California banks, and from the California banks, it went to the banks in New York City, and that after that, the buildings were purchased. But beyond the accounts in the Swiss banks, there is no document at all that the money in Switzerland came from the Philippine treasury. I am trying to simplify it as best as I can because the truth speaks. And what is the truth? The truth is there was not a single document presented out of the 350,000 documents that were used in New York that showed that there was money taken from the Philippine treasury, which bought the buildings in New York City. So the question there is, what was stolen from the Filipino people? Wala. Walang mapakita. To this day, you have supposedly intelligent lawyers, journalists, writers that keep on repeating that term, the greatest heist or the greatest plunder from the Filipino people. But where? Where is the proof? So you see, when we speak of the truth, what is important is it has to be presented as, I wrote this down, as valid, as certain, as honest, as exact, as rightful, as correct, as accurate, as consistent, as factual, as precise, as verified, as genuine, as authentic, and as infallible. In other words, you cannot question it. That is it. And the truth is, there is not a single document that would show that there was $1 or a peso or 1 centavo even that was taken from the Philippine Treasury, which landed in the Swiss banks, and from the Swiss banks to New York to purchase those 4 real estate properties. So, but this is being repeated continuously. Nagnakaw, magnanakaw. Anong ninakaw? Nasaan ang preba ng kanyang pagnanakaw? I speak of this because I saw the documents. I speak of this because I was there every day during the trial in New York. But it is the truth that speaks. And that is precisely what we are emphasizing this afternoon. Now, there were 4 feature cases filed against Mrs. Marcos when she returned here to our country. That was in 1992. The 4 feature cases all involved properties here that were allegedly owned by the Marcoses. They were all dismissed, again, because the cases were filed to show that money was stolen from the Filipino people. But there was no proof again, even though the trial was already being held here in our courtrooms. As a matter of fact, even in New York, for instance, whenever there was an allegation that was presented, there was always the question at the back of our minds, nasaan ang preba? But you had so many bankers, bank officials, cashiers, lahat ng mga nagtatrabaho sa mga bangko. They were called to testify. They also invited witnesses from the Swiss lawyers representing the Philippine government of Mrs. Aquino. And they were also part of those that were testifying that, yes, there was money in the Swiss banks. Yes, the money moved from Switzerland to the United States of America, to New York City. But no, we do not know where the money came from that landed in the Swiss banks. Yun ang wala. Yun ang hindi nila nailabas sapagkat hindi nila nahanap. Bakit? The Philippine budget of the 21 years of President Marcos is there. It is part of the official records. Anybody can inquire or can get copies of the yearly national budget. Alam natin yan because we just finished, for instance, the deliberations of the General Appropriations Act. As a matter of fact, I think the President has already signed the budget for 2022. So that is where the money is, the money of the Filipino people. That is where it is. But they did not even present a single page of any of the years of the Marcos administration. 21 years. So kahit na siguro ng 1 taon, wala silang pinalabas na pinakita na dokumento sa trial para sabihin, ito, sa taon na ito ay kumuha ng pera si Marcos sa Philippine Treasury na nakalagay yan sa General Appropriations Act na yan ang nagpapalakad ng Philippine government. So, yung 43 forfeiture cases na yon ay na-dismiss na kasi nga wala yung preba na yan. Lack of merit, lack of evidence. You must remember, hindi nabasa ko nga, the truth is validated. It validates itself. So the truth speaks. There was no valid document that would prove that for the 43 forfeiture cases, money was stolen from the Philippine Treasury. And then there was also the cases, the civil cases. And again, what they did was, ginamit nila yung mga dokumento na nagamit na rin sa New York para sabihin na ang daming bank accounts na merong pera ang mga Marcoses, and Imelda is there as part of the tawag nito, the conspiracy, or just because asawa siya ni President Marcos, kasama siya yung kanilang accusation sa nagnakaw ng pera ng taong bayan. Again, of the 900 cases or so, na-dismiss din lahat. Siguro ang natitira na lang mga 4 o 5. Pero para-pareho din ang kanilang allegations. Again, anong sabi ng mga korte na kung saan finahid itong mga kaso na ito? There is no evidence and it was dismissed for lack of merit. And this is already the Philippine government itself. Yung government na Mrs. Aquino na nag-file ng mga kasong ito hanggang sa dumating na rin yung mga iba't ibang administrasyon, patuloy din yung mga kaso na yan. So, the truth speaks. Ngayon may mga nagsasabi naman na kasi yung mga originals daw ay nawala. Ninakaw daw dun sa attaché case the former PCGG chairman Jovito Salonga. Meron daw dumukot ng kanyang attaché while he was, I think, in a restaurant or somewhere. Pero paano magkakasya naman ang mga dokumento sa isang attaché case? Sa dinami-dami ng Philippine budget, 21 years, alam ba niyo kung gaano kakapal? If you are part of the, if you see how the deliberations for the General Appropriations Act in Congress and in the Senate, ang kapal niyan, mga ilang inches yon, about 3 or 4 inches yan, sa isang taon lang. So can you imagine, 21 years, 21 books of the General Appropriations Act, of the budget of the Philippines. Yung mga originals na sinasabi nga na nawala, hindi magkakasya yan sa attaché case. And what kind of originals are they looking for? You must remember that the first persons who entered Malacanang when President Marcos and his family left was Joker Arroyo, Executive Secretary ni Mrs. Aquino, and his assistant, Potenciano Roque. And these are the testimonies that we heard in the trial in New York. Kinwento yan ni Potenciano Roque. Pumasok sila, 7:30 ng gabi or thereabouts. Hinalungkat niya lahat. Nakita niya yung filing cabinet. May mga papel siya nakita doon. Marami siyang kinuha. Hanggang sa madaling araw, nung sinundo na siya, dala-dala niya yung mga dokumento na yon at yun dinala sa bahay ewan ko kay Mr. Arroyo, at tinagoy nila yan sa Central Bank for safekeeping. At yan, ang mga dokumentong ginamit dun sa trial sa New York. In fact, usually in the chain of custody, you have the mark. Merong nilalagay nila ng, tinitimbrihan nila yan. Kung PH, Philippine, from the Philippine Palace or something like that. Tapos yung mga dokumento naman na dala nila Marcos, pag landing nila sa Hicam Air Base sa Hawaii, kinonfiscate din lahat yon. So meron din mark yung mga dokumento na yon na galing yan sa Honolulu, sa Hawaii. At yung mga dokumento naman na hinalungkat din nila sa mga bangko at kung saan-saan pa yan, yon, may mga marka din yon. So they practically have all the documents. And the Marcoses did not have any access to this until the trial in New York. Doon lang natin nakita yung mga dokumento na yon at doon lang natin nabasa. Sapagkat lahat na yan ay kinuha ng Philippine government. Kinuha nila sa mga bangko, kinuha nila sa Switzerland. So, there you have it. And the truth speaks. Because all of those documents were intact. There was the chain of custody, and they were presented, or at least most of them were presented. And then again, the truth speaks. There is not one among those documents, among those records, that could show that there was money stolen from the Philippine Treasury by the Marcoses. Ngayon, titingnan natin yung mga sequestered assets. Naku, ito siguro ang kailangan natin, hindi tayo, kailangan siguro kung sino man ang namamahala nito sa ating pamahalaan, they have to do the inquiry, the investigation of all of those sequestered assets. And what are these? It's a long list actually. I think 18 pages yan ng mga sari-saring mga ari-arian na kanilang kinuha ng Philippine government in the first few months, as a matter of fact, of the Aquino administration, of the Corazon Aquino administration. Well, the first building that they sold, kahit na wala pang due process yan, wala pang trial, wala pang preba, there has been no proof yet that that Union Square building, the building rather in Union Square, was money that was stolen from the Filipino people. And yet they got this and they sold it. So even that, walang trial yon, basta sinabi na lang na ibebenta during that time. So some investigation and inquiry will have to be undertaken as far as those sequestered assets are concerned. Ang dami pa niyan, yung real estate sa New York, okay, na-acquit si Mrs. Marcos, not guilty, meaning unanimous decision of the jury that there was nothing that was stolen from the Filipino people, kaya unanimous. She was acquitted. But ang ibig sabihin nito, that the real estate properties, yung 4 na building na binasa ko sa inyo, amounting to magkano nga ba yun? At the time, when they were purchased, $188 million in total. By 1992, siguro tumaas na yung presyo. Of course, you know how real estate is. It increases in time. And yet, the Philippine government sold it. Why? Hindi naman kanila yun. Bakit ibebenta? Kasi binili ng pera na nanggaling sa Swiss banks nilang mga Marcoses. Pero sinabi nga na walang preba na yung perang ginamit doon ay ninakaw sa Philippine Treasury. And yet, it was sold. They were sold, rather. Then you have several other real estate properties. Ang haba na niyan, hindi ko nababasahin lahat. And of course, the sequestered assets, Philcomsat, etc. The geothermal, which is a government, which belonged to the government. Can you imagine? It was also sold to a private individual. First, sa kapatid ni former Senator Ninoy Aquino. Tapos binenta niya again to another private entity. And now it is not even owned by the government anymore. And to think that this is a natural resource, that's geothermal. Yan yung steam and the heat that comes from the depths of the bowels of our volcanoes. Yan. Hindi naman ninakaw ni Marcos yung perang pinagpatayo dyan. Pera ng taong bayan yan. Bakit binenta to a private individual? And then now it has passed on from several other private individuals too. Then you also have Meralco, which was a Meralco Foundation, which is also public service. And then you also have our water system, Nawasa, which they broke now into the Manila Water and the Maynila, whatever it is. Now it's privately owned. Again, sinequester, pagkatapos binenta. Then you have the nuclear plant, which ought to have been operational already about a few months after 1986. Hindi rin natuloy. And then, of course, this whole big fuss about the jewelries that they found in Malacanang, in the vaults, the jewelries that were confiscated from this Greek. Nothing has been proven yet as far as the purchase of those jewelries are concerned. Hindi yan pumasok ng trial. There was no due process. Basta sinabi lang, ay ninakaw yan. Yung mga jewelries na yan ni Mrs. Marcos, yung mga nasa vault. By what court order? Basta tinago sa central bank at sinabi na it has to be auctioned. But, you know, there is still something that has to be done to prove that it was stolen. They were stolen from the Filipino people. Ang dami niyan. I have also mentioned in several of our episodes regarding the Renaissance and the pre-Renaissance paintings that were purchased by Mrs. Marcos, not with money from the Philippine government, mind you. Kasi wala ring trace yan, walang evidence, walang papel, walang dokumentong pinalabas na kumuha ng pera sa Philippine government si Mrs. Marcos para bilihin yung mga paintings na yon. As a matter of fact, I've showed this several times. And they sold it. They auctioned it. Christie's of New York, they had it auctioned. And they were already on exhibit at our Metropolitan Museum. Oh my goodness. Yung ating mga painters, sculptors, writers, they all went to the Supreme Court to object to the sale. Kasi atin yun eh. Binili yun para sa atin. Nakalagay na nga sa mga museum, naka-exhibit na nga. And yet, the Aquino government sold it. As a matter of fact, ang laking debate niyan sa Supreme Court. Kasi nagkaroon ng tie. Several justices were in favor of selling it. Several justices were against selling it. And the government was represented by the Solicitor General. Ang kalaban ng Philippine government, ang PCGG, ang nagre-represent niyan, kaso na yan. Ang kalaban nila ay yung mga artists natin, painters, sculptors, musicians, writers, novelists. Lahat yan, they all appeared in the Supreme Court when the trial was ongoing. The sad part about it was the Chief Justice himself who broke the tie. Chief Justice Fernan. Kasi nag-tie yung Supreme Court at the time. A sad day for art, for culture. A sad day for our artists who protested the sale. And then there was also the silver collection. In-auction din nila. Ano ba yung silver collection na yan? Well, this is the silver collection which Mrs. Marcos bought in Moscow. Sapagkat up for sale yon at murang-mura na lang ibebenta. And can you imagine, ito pa yung panahon ng mga imperial reign, ng mga hari at mga reyna ng Russia, ng Soviet Union. And that entire silver collection was also already stored in ito pa, yung dalawang buildings sa katabi ng Malacanang na tinatawag na Maharlika 1 and Maharlika 2. Sa loob ng building na yan, andyan yung silver collection na yan. Why did they auction it? Were they able to prove na nakaw na pera ang ginamit dyan? Meron ba silang resibo para ipakita na pera ng taong bayan ang ang bumili niyan? And they auctioned it again for, my goodness, for 1/3 of the actual value of the items there in that silver collection. And I was speaking about Maharlika 1 and Maharlika 2. Well, we were never shown the contents of these two buildings. Yan yung mga lumang building na pinaayos ni Mrs. Marcos sapagkat diyan niya inilagay yung mga precious objects na yan para sa panahon ay pwede itong makita when they're on exhibit, makita ng taong bayan. Andyan yung mga regalo sa kanila ng mga heads of state. You must remember, every time she goes on a visit, a diplomatic mission, or President Marcos, when he receives, for instance, a delegation from a foreign country, may mga dala sila ng mga token, gifts. And these are precious items. Merong there is one item there for isang upuan which was made of jade. Isang napakagandang silya that was carved out of jade. Andun yan. Yung mga vase, mga paintings, objects of art, ang dami. And they are there in those two buildings, Maharlika 1 and Maharlika 2, mga naka-eskaparate yan. They were inside cabinets, glass cabinets. Para nga, pagka nakatalog na yan, hindi lang natatapos pa yung pagkatalog ng lahat ng yan and the history of all of these objects. Sino ba nagregalo niyan? Saan ba nanggaling yan? Anong bansa ba ang nagbigay niyan? Because these are not personal items of Ferdinand and Imelda. These were gifts and these were tokens that were given to them. Yung iba siguro ay yung mga nakita ni Mrs. Marcos sa pagbiyahe-biyahe niya ay binili. Again, as we said, kung binili ba niya yan, may preba ba na yung perang ginamit niya ay pera ng taong bayan? Wala. Sapagkat kung meron silang preba, tilabas na sana nila yan doon sa 350,000 documents na kanilang naipon-ipon galing sa Malacanang at kung saan-saan pa yan. So yan ang dalawang building na hanggang sa kasalukuyan, tayo, ang taong bayan, hindi pa nila pinapakita sa atin kung ano talaga ang nasa loob ng dalawang buildings, dalawang bahay na yan. I have seen some of them, hindi naman kasi naikot ko lahat, ngunit yung mga valuable objects of art, my goodness, as I've said, I've seen this chair, which is completely carved out of jade. I've seen objects of art, mga jars, mga vase, several other items that are incredibly beautiful. Talaga, parang was something that we can be proud of because now it is part of our cultural exhibit. Anong nangyari dyan? Hindi natin alam up to this day. Kaya sinasabi ko nga, lahat yung mga sine-question na yan ng PCGG, kailangan tingnan natin sapagkat dyan makikita. Meron bang ginamit sa pagbili ng mga bagay na yan na nanggaling sa pera ng taong bayan? You have the Lindenmere Estate, for instance. O parating pinag-uusapan yan. Ginawan pa nga ng mga pelikula, some part of some documentary. Na-acquit si Imelda as far as all of these are concerned. Bakit nila pinagbili? Who has the right to this when they don't even own it? The Olympic Towers, for instance. Yung tinirhan nila sa Honolulu, bahay ng mga Marcoses. Makiki Heights, dalawa yan. Merong dalawang bahay residences yan. Yung kung saan tumira ang mga Marcoses, yan ang sinasabi ko ba, it has the panoramic view of the city of Honolulu all the way up to Waikiki Beach, all the way to see the Pacific Ocean, as a matter of fact. You had the consul there in Hawaii, an appointee of Mrs. Aquino, who just took over those houses without any due process. And even after the acquittal of the Marcoses in the trial of New York, that there is no proof that anybody from the Filipino people was ever used to purchase those buildings. And yet, they were sold by the government of Mrs. Aquino or they were taken over. So that is exactly why the truth speaks. One single truth runs through all of this. And so we could see how important it is that at this particular stage in our contemporary politics, we really have to look over many of the things that they accuse the Marcoses of and which they try to bring out to destroy the reputation and the heritage of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Even if you stretch your imagination, I do not think you can connect any of this to the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. or Bongbong, BBM, as he is so fondly called. Sapagkat lahat ng ito ay nangyari nung kapanahunan ng kanyang ama at ng kanyang ina from 1966 to 1986. At pagkatapos ng 1986, diyan natin nakikita kung ano naman ang ginawa ng mga administrasyon, lalong-lalo na yung unang administrasyon na pumasok noon ni Mrs. Aquino, kung ano ang mga ginawa nila dito sa mga bagay-bagay na sinabi nga natin as of 1992 ay libre na ng guilt. Wala na yung bahid ng plunder or bahid ng having stolen that money from the Filipino people. The truth speaks. The truth spoke. The 350,000 documents spoke. 95 witnesses. Their truth speaks. Sila ang nagsabi, hindi nila alam kung saan nanggaling yung pera na pumasok sa Swiss banks na sinasabi nila ay ari-arian ni President Marcos. Bakit hindi nila alam? Walang preba. There is no evidence. No evidence. Mahirap ba maintindihan yun? Mahirap, hindi po ba sa mga taong ayaw maniwala? Pero ito, hindi ako ang nagsasalita. Ang katotohanan ang nagsasalita. The truth speaks. It is valid, it is certain, it is just, it is honest, it is exact, it is rightful, it is correct, accurate, consistent, factual, precise, verified, genuine, authentic, and infallible. The truth speaks. Tingnan na ba natin, pinag-uusapan ko nga yung pera ng taong bayan. Sa 21 years or 20 years plus several months ni President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos, magkano ang kanyang budget? Total, 488 billion. I rounded it up, actually 486 point something. So, sabihin na natin 488 billion pesos. Yan ang total ng kanyang 20 years na administration. Ano yung accusation ng mga nag-o-oppose kay President Marcos? Hanggang sa ngayon, lumalaki pa nga eh. Sa umpisa, sabi nila, 200 billion ang ninakaw dun sa National Treasury. May iba nagsasabi dyan, mga abogado ito, nagsasabi, 380 billion ang ninakaw sa atin pera ng taong bayan, sa kaban ng bayan. Kahit na siguro hindi kayo actuary or you don't do actuarial studies on this, sa 488 billion na budget ng 20 years, at yung kanilang accusation na 200 to about 380 billion ang ninakaw dyan sa budget ng 488 billion, paano umandar ang gobyerno doon sa loob ng 20 years? Anong ginamit para magtayo ng mga karsada? The roads, the bridges, the seaports, the airports, lahat na yan, yung geothermal plant, yung nuclear plant, lahat ng mga ospital na itinayo, tertiary hospitals, can you imagine, state of the art. The Philippine Center for Asia, the Kidney Center, the Lung Center, the Children's Center, at lahat pa ng mga iba't ibang mga gusali na itinayo. Diyan na lang sa Cultural Center Complex, PICC, Cultural Center, Folk Arts Theater, the Film Center, yung exhibit ng mga design centers dyan, lahat, trade centers and so forth, and sa Mount Makiling, and all the different human settlements throughout the country na tinayo, yung Bliss Housing, Bagong Lipunan Sites and Services, lahat ng mga infrastructure na tinayo noon, hindi lang ito kagaya kasalukuyan na horizontal lahat, karsada, seaport, airport, mga bridges. Dito, nung panahon ni President Marcos, vertical and horizontal infrastructure, buildings and roads, etc. Sa lahat ng ginastos dyan, nagnakaw siya ng 200 billion at 380 billion, sabi pa nga nung recently, sasabi lang ng isang abogado, yung nagagalit nga kay President Duterte gawa ng South China Sea, ay naku po, the truth speaks. A budget of 488 billion and the accusation that Marcos stole 200 billion, malaking discrepancy yon. So, the truth speaks. That is verified, that is authentic, and it is infallible. Meron din silang sinasabi na, yan, meron akong listahan kasi dito na tungkol nga sa foreign debt. Yung foreign debt na yan, sinasabi nga na, well, I just have a summary of this. may mga utang tayo na gagaling sa ibang bansa. Siyempre, kailangan din ito sa maraming itinatayo. Sa lahat-lahat na ginawang infrastructure at lahat ng investments na nangyari nung panahon ni President Marcos ng 20 years, at tandaan ninyo, hindi lang ito utang ng gobyerno. May mga private individuals din na umutang overseas na ang guarantee ng mga utang na yon nitong private individuals, guaranteed din ng government. Halimbawa, yung pagtatayo ng mga part of the LRT, kahit na yan ay, it was a Belgian loan with very low interest, there were still private firms that also joined in for the construction of this railways, the first, as a matter of fact, in the ASEAN light railway system. So merong foreign investment dyan. In other words, merong utang ang pamahalaan sa mga foreign, yan, sa IMF, International Monetary Fund, sa World Bank, and several other foreign enterprises na tumulong sa pagtayo ng ating mga infrastructure. Magkano yung total ng inutang ni President Marcos? Well, this is what I gathered from the Philippine external debt records. $28 billion. Yung panahon ni President Marcos. $28 billion for 20 years. Nung panahon ni Mrs. Aquino, 6 years lang yan. $32.93 billion. Kayo na rin ang maghanap kung ano mga natayo dyan maliban doon sa nakita nga ninyo dyan sa EDSA. Kay Fidel Ramos, 6 years din siya naging presidente. Magkano yung ating foreign debt? $46.31 billion. Nung panahon ni President Estrada, maigsi lang yon, 1998 lang hanggang 2001. And yet, yung foreign debt ay $51.35 billion. Nung kay Mrs. Arroyo, GMA, 2001 to 2010, magkano yung total dati na foreign debt? $73.95 billion. Yung kay President Noynoy Aquino, 2010 to 2016, magkano yung ating foreign debt? $77.47 billion. Yung kay President Duterte, I do not have the figures up to date. I only have the figures of 2 years. Sa 2 years na yan, 2016 to 2018, $72.2 billion. I still have to do some research of the foreign debt up to this stage. Medyo siguro tumaas ito sapagkat ang dami nating kinailangan nung pumasok na itong pandemic. So kung titingnan ninyo, from $28 billion nung panahon ni Marcos for 20 years, yan ang mga nagyaring foreign debt natin sa mga subsequent administrations. Kaya pagsasabihin nga na nagnakaw sa taong bayan, ay kayo na siguro malahil ang gumawa ng arithmetic nito, so simple arithmetic na lang. Now we come to the other issue at bibilisan ko na lang ito sapagkat we only have just a couple of minutes to go. At ito naman yung sinasabing torturer. Dalawang salita ang kanilang ginagamit dito pagka gusto nilang siraan yung ama ng ating kandidato sa pagka-presidente na si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Plunderer, nasagot na natin, hindi akong sumagot. The truth speaks in answer to that accusation. Wala siyang ninakaw sa taong bayan. Ito naman tinatawag na torturer, human rights violations, yan na. Kasi yan ay nagsimula dun sa final na human rights cases sa Amerika. Apat lang yan dati. Nabanggit ko na rin yung mga taong nag-file ng human rights cases. Ito, nangunguna yung presidente ng Communist Party of the Philippines, si Jose Maria Sison. Sapagkat si President Marcos ay nasa Honolulu, inisip nila na, sige nga, mag-file tayo ng claim for human rights violations. Tandaan ninyo, this is not a claim for human rights violations. This was not a human rights violation case. Kasi ang human rights violation case is a criminal case. Kinakailangan na humarap si President Marcos sa korte because criminal yan. Hindi yun ang kanilang final. Ang final nila is a civil claim for damages. Meron akong aray, bayaran mo yung aray ko. Naputol yung aking kamay, bayaran mo yon. Pero hindi ko kailangan i-prove. Basta sinasabi ko lang na victim ako. So I am filing a claim for damages. So yan ang pinagsimulan ng human rights cases na yan. Alam mo, shortcut eh. Pag sinasabing human rights cases, parang violation ng human rights. Hindi. Human rights cases for civil damages. In other words, walang preba na meron talagang nangyaring human rights. Why am I being technical about this? Because the truth speaks. Those are the court records. That's exactly how it was. When you go over what was filed in Honolulu, and it was taken over by Judge Manuel Real from California, that's exactly how it is presented. A civil case for damages, for human rights violations that were not proven. Kasi mismo ang Amerika nagsasabi na according to their law, yung Torture Victims Act nila, according to their law, human rights violations should be tried in the country of origin. So dito sana yan nilitis. Kaya ang ginawa nila, hindi na violations. Bayad na lang. Pay us for damages. That is what happened. At yung sa apat na nag-file, itong mga incredibly brain-drained lawyers, sabi na dagdagan natin, bakit apat lang? Gawin nating class suit. 10,000 victims ang nabiktima ni President Marcos. Can you imagine that? 10,000 class suit. Yun ang sinasabi ng pinakamagaling na kanilang civil lawyer sa Amerika, si Mr. Mark Lane. I keep on mentioning his name because I talked to him several times by long distance regarding this case of class suit. And that's exactly how he answered me. Sabi niya, Rita, kung sakaling si President Marcos nagkarga ng 10,000 tao sa isang barko at yan, barko na yan nilubog niya, that's a class suit. Sapagkat isang act, isang human right violation act sa 10,000 people na biktima. O di kaya, nilatag nila sa lansangan at sumakay siya sa road roller, sinagasaan sila. Hindi lahat namatay, yung iba na injured lang, yung iba nakatakas and all of that. That's a class suit. Pero yung ginagawa nila ngayon dyan sa Honolulu, in a period of 21 years and even beyond, iba't ibang mga klaseng sinasabi nila na ang human rights nila ay na-violate. Hindi pwede yan. Hindi pwede yan na class suit. And of course, the bottom line there, the essence of the truth that speaks there is a human rights violation is a criminal case. Why did they not file a criminal case against Ferdinand Marcos here in our country? According to our law, according to international law, and according to American law itself, kailangan sa country of origin. Hindi yan ginawa. So, anyway, now there is a lot of furor over this. Ang dami-dami nagsasabi na yan na nga ang mga issue laban ga kay Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos. Ngunit, as I have emphasized over and over, the truth speaks. No evidence. At isang parati kong binabanggit, yun na rin sinabi ng korte mismo ng Amerika sa Ninth Circuit Court sa LA. Ito yung Court of Appeals ng Los Angeles na sinabi na ang pinipresenta lang parati dito sa korte ay mga publications, mga dyaryo, walang ebidensya. At sinabi rin ng mga justices dun sa Ninth Circuit Court, I may not be quoting this verbatim, but this is almost part of my memorized truth speaks. If President Marcos went to the Central Bank of the Philippines or to the National Treasury and at gunpoint got the money of the Filipino people and brought that money, kept that money under his mattress, and then brought that money to the United States of America to buy some real estate properties or buy whatever he wanted in the United States of America, yan, masasabi mo pa na nagnakaw siya sa taong bayan. But until such time as there is no proof to that effect, the court dismissed that case. So, yan na po ang summary natin. It is not I speaking, it is the truth that speaks. So, I have repeated this a number of times, but perhaps this time I am letting the truth speak. Not I, but the truth itself. I have mentioned exactly what the truth is. It is authentic. It is infallible. Before we close, I'd like to just briefly go over some of our guests who joined us. Again, siguro naghahanap kayo kung sino ang guest ko ngayon. Pagdasal na lang natin sila, although nothing serious, but they're coughing, they have fever, sneezing, and so forth. Yan na nga yung COVID na yan. MS Au, hello po. Ma'am Rita, hello din. Beth Sardina, good afternoon po. Good afternoon. Belinda Boc. Oh, my sorority sister, Belinda. You're very faithful as far as listening in. Oh, by the way, just for the record, for purposes, we established a sorority in the College of Law of San Beda. And Myra Incong, who's a lawyer practicing in Rojas City, together with several others, kami ang nagtayo ng sorority dyan, Sororitas Regina Juris ng San Beda College of Law. And it may please you to know that Inday Sara, mayor of Davao City, who's now candidate for the vice presidency, is a member of our sorority. Naalala ko kasi ito si Belinda, one of our sorority sisters. Ang tawag niya sa akin, Queen Mother. That's how they call one of the origins who established this sorority. Hello, Ma'am Rita. Magandang araw po. This is from ME. Janet Ramos, hello po. MSA, gusto ko po sanang magtanong tungkol po sa pinapakalat na mainstream na tungkol sa contempt kaso nila Inelda at BBM. I still have to look over this, kung ano yung contempt case na yan. Julie Rebom, good evening po from Sydney, Australia. O ingat kayo dyan, talagang mahigpit sila. Dineport na nila yung isang tennis player dyan. Cherry Ann Danga, thanks Doc. Gloria Berting Bondok, hi po. RJ Avellana, oh my goodness, all the best to you. Please do not forget, for Senate, lagay ninyo yung kaagad. RJ Avellana, kasamahan natin sa Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino. Patty, hi Ma'am Rita, hi to you too. Maite Baisa, good afternoon. Jonathan Nepomuceno, let us sign the petition to quash the Senate bill that mandate us to take the job. Ayan na, lumalakad na yan. Why will the unvaccinated suffer from the contamination coming from the vaccinated? Maganda talaga yung pag-aralan. Zaira Nagyo, ang ganda ng pangalan, but Zaira. My ancestor, Dato Mandi, was the leader of the indigenous people and was said to be owner of some of the gold that Marcos has been trying to get. So ayan na. Ang daming ginto sa mga kuweba at sa kung saan-saan ng mga bundok. Ayan na. At talaga naman nahiligan din ni President Marcos yung paghahanap ng mga ginto na yan. MSAO, sana po explain nyo po sa amin. Alam ko po kasi nangyari po ito ng time ni Cory at FDR, saka po yung mga Operation Big Bird. Oh yes, I will deal with that in some other episode. Operation Big Bird. Yan po yung kila Secretary Almonte at Michael de Guzman at kasama dyan sila Cedri Ordonez. Yes, I have the, again, as I said, it's a 1.5 thick document na pinresenta yan sa court. So these are public records. Then we have Gears 2 game. I like po natin para lumagana po ang katotohanan. Nasa sa inyo na yan because we are on YouTube and on Facebook. Share po natin ang videos ni Ma'am Rita. Maraming salamat. Jackie, no, hello po from, naku, hindi mo sinabi kung taga saan. Laila Burakova, good afternoon to you too. Selma Tariman, watching po from South Korea. Love ko po kayo, ma'am. Solid po ang ako sa vlog nyo. Oh, sa Korea, napakahalaga yung pinag-uusapan kong nuclear plant. Tinan nyo kung gaano ka prosperous at progressive ang South Korea. Kasabay natin yan na nagtayo ng nuclear plant. Nakausap ko yung mga engineers ng Westinghouse at sinabi nila na simultaneous ang pagtayo. O ngayon, ilan na yung nuclear plant nila? Ang dami-dami na. And look at how progressive they are. Tayo, meron na nga ginawa yung hindi pa natin napapaandar. Anyway, madam, kung pang mga bulag sa katotohanan, yung mga crown building din ng millions, imagine how much money, yes, how much money was wasted. At saan napunta yung pera na yan? Agrarian reform, sabi na kanilang batas. Bakit ngayon, hanggang ngayon, tayo ay naghihirap pa tungkol sa food security kung talagang nabigay na lahat yung pera na yan? Anyway, Gatsby Talco, history will tell, yes, but the truth speaks louder and far more accurate. Sabi nga, history is usually written by whoever is there in power, but the truth is infallible. And the rest of the fools are only the people who stood in their tongue. So anyway, Pauline, Carpio is full of, hindi ko nababasahin yung sinabi mo. Kat Santos, I'm thankful that so many eyes are open now. Thanks to people like you. Maraming salamat din po, etc., etc. Naku, ang dami pa nito at umaabot na tayo ng 4 minutes overtime. So lahat yung mga sequestered na yan, sabi ko nga, meron akong listahan yan, pero hindi ako ang kailangan magsiyasat at mag-imbestiga at mag-inquiry. Kayo na rin ang kinakailangan na magsalita tungkol dito. So anyway, thank you for all of those who joined us and for all of those who participate in actually what the truth is telling all of us. And so, dear Lord, walk with us through this season of the pandemic, even though this Omicron has contaminated millions already. Open our hearts to your guidance, O Lord, and give us the strength to share your love with others through this time of uncertainty. May we look at each day as a celebration of your greatness, and please make us ready to receive your merciful healing and love. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you for having joined me. This is Rita Gadi, and this has been your hour.